Hello and welcome to part 2 of the Understanding Stress presentation. In part 1 we defined stress as the state arising when the individual perceives that the demands placed on them exceed or threaten to exceed their capacity to cope. We had a look at the human story and what we are as a species. We looked at the human givens and needs that have to be met in balance if we are to thrive. The fact that we will be in distress if any one of these needs is not being met in balance, and the resources which we've been given by nature to get our needs met. Now I want to look at a different idea. This is now very practical, very useful to us, these ideas. And this is the idea of emotional spare capacity. We met it in the deployment brief, but here we want to look at it in a little more detail. So think of this as a scale, and each individual person has their own particular quota of emotional capacity. Now, this is different for each of us, and it may vary according to what's going on in our lives at any one time. But if we imagine that this is your quota of emotional spare capacity, and the baseline is where you are completely relaxed and chilled, so there's no stress in your life, you're completely relaxed, and ideally that's the way you want to get out of bed every morning, so that when you go into the day you've got all this emotional capacity to be able to deal with the challenges of the day. So this line is a measure of the stress that we may be experiencing, but it's also a measure of the emotional capacity available to us. Once you've hit the top of your line, essentially this is what I call the tipping point. And this is where you're going to experience the anger outbursts, the tears, the distress, some form of emotional outburst because you can't take any more. You've had as much as you can take. Now, as I say, ideally, we want to be starting at our baseline. Then we go into our daily life, whether it's looking after the children, whether it's going to the workplace, whatever that day may bring. Let's assume we go into work. So we go into work and we met with the robust banter of the military workplace, shall we say. And maybe these people wind you up a little bit, but you've got all this capacity, so you can bounce off your baseline, you can get a little bit irritated, a little bit angry, and you can settle back, you can just take it and give it. That's fine, you've got all this capacity. You're given a job and it's pretty challenging, so again you can sort of rise off your baseline, you've got this emotional stimulation, and that's fine, plenty to absorb it and to settle back. And so your day goes on, and hopefully you come home, you nice DVD, curry, can of lager, whatever, and you settle back to your baseline and jobs are good, and you wake up the next day refreshed, ready to do it all again. But we may not be beginning each day at our baseline. Maybe when we go into work, go into our daily lives, we've got other things which are stressing us out. Health issues, money problems, relationship issues, existential angst, whatever your thing is that you worry about. Remember, worry, the misuse of the imagination, is the cause of mental illness. So misusing your imagination. So if you're worrying about anything, you may have already eaten into your spare capacities. You haven't got all this available to you, you've only got this much available to you. It may be that you've been traumatized. Now, to maintain a trauma in your nervous system actually eats into your spare capacity, takes energy out of the system. People who are brain damaged through drug misuse, or people who get older and are experiencing symptoms of dementia, for instance, they may have less spare capacity available to them. And this all means that the challenges that the day brings, you're not bouncing off your nice relaxed chilled baseline, you're bouncing off maybe halfway up the scale before you even start, and you can then hit your tipping point more quickly. So it means the things which you may once have done more easily and without any problem at all, taking that banter, taking those jobs, kids playing up, great. When you're bouncing off there, you find them harder to take, you find them harder to cope with, you reach tipping point more quickly. Now this again explains several phenomena. I've experienced in the workplace, in a military environment, because I'm a military chaplain, that people in mid to late career occasionally. People you thought were absolutely solid people, reliable people, always take on the extra jobs. Suddenly, we've experienced them just keeling over at their desks, can't take any more, not staying here a moment later, anger outbursts, not coming back to work. And you think, what's happened? These are solid people. But what has happened is, unbeknownst to us, reaching midlife, other stuff was happening that was eating away at their spare capacity. It's the age, midlife, where often health issues start to come, relationship worries, financial worries, children in university, wherever it is. And so these people maybe are stressed out before you start, and then because they're Mr. Reliable, somebody piles the extra jobs onto them at work, in with a robust banter, whatever, and then as a big surprise, when these people meet their tipping point and they're in trouble. It also explains the walking on eggshells phenomena. There's some people are so prickly, you don't know where you stand with them. But these are people who are not perhaps like that intentionally, but they're very stressy people because something is eating away at their spare capacities. They're always getting over emotional, they're overreacting to the normal stuff of life. So what we want to be able to do ideally is find a way of setting ourselves back to our baseline, understanding what is eating into our spare capacity, and then finding a way of taking ourselves back. That would be a really useful thing to be able to do. It's also explanatory for our experience of other people. So that's spare capacity, a useful idea to have in mind. Now I'd like to introduce you to my drawing of a cauliflower on a stick. This is actually my rubbish drawing of a brain, spinal cord, frontal lobes and the back of your head. So there's your brain, and the bits that we're interested in today are very few organs, and this bit here is called the limbic system, it's part of the limbic system, which is your emotional brain. It's called the limbic system because it's in the shape of a limbus, and it's the bits which developed really early on top of the brainstem, and wraps itself around the brainstem to control putting us into motion. That's what emotions do. They move us towards things or away from things. Emotions put us into motion. And the bits which we need to understand are the amygdala, which is this bit here, is a small almond-shaped organ, and the amygdala is almond in Greek, funny old thing. And the hippocampus, which is this bit here. Now then, the way the human brain evolved, we believe, is this. You start like an onion, inside out. So you have the spinal column with some cells gathered around there, and you get the brainstem, and this takes care of your basic biological things. Anything goes wrong with that and you're dead in pretty short order. Then the limbic system, like a limbus, wraps itself around to help the organism be more sophisticated in the way it moves towards things and away from things, i.e. emotions. And then the neocortex, the new cortex, grew around and over the limbic system. So these big lobes are neocortex. And they do the modern sophisticated things. So our modern sophisticated thinking, like human thinking that makes us human, is done in the frontal lobes. But the bits that evolved first have some sort of priority in the brain, and they can take over, because without what they do, you could die. So effectively, around your brainstem, you're stuffed. The emotions exist to put you into motion, often quickly in an emergency. So if they come online big time, the emotional brain can turn off effectively your thinking brain, your higher sophisticated thinking. So let's take an example here. If a tiger were to suddenly walk into the room and I was using my frontal lobes, the action would be, what does Encyclopedia Britannica tell me about this form of tiger, its geographical distribution, etc. Now that's too slow, it's inappropriate for the moment. The activity of the limbic system is to think, tiger, run or fight. What are we going to do? So it's putting you into action to survive that encounter. And the amygdala is your security system. So all the sensory input that we receive is filtered through the amygdala. And if it's okay, no problem, it goes on to the rest of your brain and you carry on. If the amygdala, however, senses that it could be dangerous, it has the power to set off the fight or flight response. It's an emergency system. It's actually the fight, flight or freeze response. And this is all to do with surviving encounters with danger, primarily predators. So if you were your typical hunter-gatherer again, you're out in the fields, in the woods, doing the good stuff, you come across a predator, jumps out of the bushes, your amygdala sets off the fight or flight response, shuts down the slower processes of the frontal lobes, so it can make quick, simple survival decisions. And those decisions are, have I got to fight this thing? Can I run away from it, get up a tree, short sprints? Or none of the above, therefore freeze. And if we freeze, it may be that the predator will lose us in the background of the trees, because predators' vision is often configured to see motion. So keep them very still. We've survived a lot of predatory encounters. And the other thing, if you ever watch the old nature programs, is that sometimes even if you get caught, so the old gazelle gets caught by, I don't know, the lion or wherever, and the lion is tired after running down his gazelle, the gazelle then is on the floor and it's been flooded with these hormones by its amygdala, and it freezes, junk. And so the lion thinks, job's a good one, I'll have a nap before I have my dinner. And when he has his nap, the gazelle shakes itself and runs off, and then the lion wakes up and thinks, where's my dinner? So the whole thing of the freeze, the playing dead thing, again, can sometimes save the creature from getting eaten. So fight, flight or freeze. Now, great for dealing with predators, not so great for dealing with London buses, because flight is great. You see that bus out the corner of your eye, how you missed it stepping off the curb, who knows, you weren't paying attention. And your amygdala, before you have a chance to think about it, before consciousness has you leaping nimbly out of the way, saves your life. That's great. Had he made the wrong choice and put you into fight, you would lose the fight. Had he put you into freeze, that's a really bad decision, hard luck. But it can't be helped. This is the thing, this is all unconscious. These are not decisions you make, they are unconsciously made for you very, very quickly before it comes to conscious thought. So the more emotional we are, i.e. the more turned on the limbic system is, the more turned off the frontal lobes are. And we are then forced to think in the style of the emotional brain. Great for quick emergencies, bad for decision making and life planning. So if you're a worrier who takes home predators in your head, i.e. things which might go wrong in your life, and you're constantly working your emotions up with these worries, turning on this part of your brain, you're turning off this part of your brain. To use your frontal lobes, you have to be calm. You have to be somewhere near your baseline. And so, simple statement, strong emotion makes us stupid. The more emotional you are, the stupider you are, because you're thinking of a primitive part of your brain. This is configured to make simple, quick decisions. Black and white thinking, we call it, either or, fight or flight. When you turn its attentions to more relationships, she loves me, she hates me. You turn it to life. Life is fantastic, life is rubbish, I might as well kill myself. It's this extreme black and white binary system thinking that this part of your brain does, which is not good. So again, this is one of the explanations why people commit suicide. They get strongly emotional, so they're thinking of this simple binary system. There's no grey areas, there's no, well, I've got a few problems in my life, but on balance, there's enough to keep going for. It's either great or it's rubbish. And therefore, suicide seems a reasonable thing to do. And reasoning of this part of your brain, it is a reasonable thing to do. But if you're reasoning with your frontal lobes, if you were calm, you could see, well, actually, it isn't a reasonable thing to do. So people, especially men, on a strong emotional whim quite often, will go out and do it. People who are locked into the emotional brain and using this to plan their lives often will do it as well and do silly things. Will pack in relationships or whatever because they're not worth working on. Whereas thinking of this part of your brain, they are worth working on. So do not make any major life decisions unless you're calm and you have access to your full thinking capacity. One of the characteristics, I guess, some of the characteristics of this black and white thinking, which we call catastrophic thinking, because it always ends in catastrophe if you're planning your life with your emotional brain. So you worry, you get emotional, you're stupid, you plan your life with black and white thinking, you cause catastrophes. The characteristics of this style of thinking are that you tend to take things personally. So people who think like this, it's all about me. It's all my fault. This sort of thing always happens to me. Why does nothing ever go right for me? It's all personal, which are stupid really, but there you go. So we've got the 3 Ps. It's all pervasive. She's left me, therefore my whole life is ruined. You still got your health, you still got a good job, you still got your friends. Now that's reasoning with the frontal lobes. For the person who's locked in here, whatever's gone wrong affects everything. It's all pervasive. It's never going to get any better. Pervades everything. Well, I've jumped. It's permanent. It's never going to get any better. Can never see it changing. So locked into this black and white thinking, personal, all pervasive and permanent. Permanent are the characteristics of thinking. And it's no wonder people get depressed when they develop this thinking style. But to break out of this thinking style, you have to calm down so that you have access to your frontal lobes and you can think. Other things which are characteristics of the emotional brain. Pattern matching. Pattern matching is when we may have an automatic reaction to something that happens to us in the environment because we have a conditioned learning that something has happened before. And that can make us overreact emotionally to people, to places, to stimulus. And we may wonder, why am I acting like this? Why am I feeling like this? Why do I never get on with this type of person, or whatever it is? It can be a pattern match, and we can have faulty pattern matches because the amygdala just has crude pattern matchings quite often because it wants to keep us safe, but it can be too crude to be helpful sometimes. We need to fix the pattern matches. Phobias and post-traumatic stress disorder are all to do with the way the amygdala has learned to react to certain triggers in the environment. And often if you've experienced a stressful situation around a certain stimulus, you will then develop a phobia or a trauma template associated with that. Because the amygdala unconsciously, again, you can't feed back to it with your conscious mind, it grabs the sensory things that are going on when the danger occurred or when it perceived that there was danger, and to try and avoid the danger in the future, it sets off a phobic reaction when you meet someone. So you see you're in a car accident, screeching tyres, smell of burning rubber, the flash of red as a fire engine came, and of course you were highly emotional as you were in the car accident. The amygdala grabs all that sensory information because it doesn't want this to happen to you in the future. So the next time you hear something like the squeal of tyres, smell burning rubber, see the flash of red at the corner of your eye, or something similar enough, could be the squeal of the trolley wheels in the supermarket or wherever, just like those squealing tyres, the amygdala then sets off the fight or flight response. No danger actually there, but the amygdala is playing it safe. It's like the hunter-gatherer going through the desert, through the forest, and there's the rustle in the leaves, the shadow behind the trees, and perhaps there's nothing. But it's rather you overreact several times than to get eaten. So it plays it safe. Better to have your mates laughing at you than to be the one that gets caught by the predator. That's what it's trying to do. But of course in modern life, you can't go shopping in the supermarket. That's a bit of a problem. So we need to sort out phobias and PTSD. Some people talk about emotionally driven trance states. What they mean by this is that strong emotions lock attention. They don't let us think about anything else. So something which is really worrying us is like a predator circling. So if you think of worry, whatever it is, am I going to keep my job? What's that doctor's report going to say? Am I going to manage the mortgage? Is she going to leave me? These are the same sorts of things as I'm out to my hunter-gathering trip, I'm out on a little nap, and I know there's a predator in the area. But my brain is not going to want me to take my eye off the ball, doesn't want me to fall into a deep sleep, doesn't want me to forget about the predator and start fantasizing about Major League Football or whatever it is. And so it keeps bringing my mind back. Don't forget the predator, don't forget the predator, don't forget the predator. It locks our attention in. So people with a lot of worries can't get it out of their head, can't take their mind off it. There's also a process we call selective recall, which means whatever your dominant emotional state at the moment, when you try and remember other stuff that's happened to you, you tend to call into mind memories that had a similar emotional content to what you're feeling now. Because all memories are emotionally tagged, and we tend to go to the filing cabinet with that emotional tag on it. So you ask a miserable person, how was your childhood? And they tell you all the miserable, horrible things that happened to them when they were children. If you ask a happy person, you get happy memories back. So asking a depressed person, how did you get on with your mother and father? What was your childhood like? You're in for a tale of woe. That's just the way it is. Because we selectively and automatically recall memories of a similar emotional tagging. Which shows the characteristics of your emotional brain. And I think, yeah, we've got one more page. We'll leave it there. And this is the human function curve graph. This is line is performance, how good we can actually do stuff in the world. This is the amount of pressure going on us. And when there's very little pressure on us, no stimulation, no challenge in life, people get bored, and so they don't perform very well. And boredom itself is a stressor, because when you're bored, your need for meaning is not being met. So your brain is not stimulated by learning or anything. There's no reason to get it out of bed. So you're not getting your needs met when you're bored. So therefore, you will experience stress or distress. When there's sufficient pressure, like stimulation, enthusiasm, need, your performance starts to go up. And I've got to put stretched here, bored there, stretched there, which means you're being stimulated, you're being challenged, you're having to rise to it, you learn, you become more effective in the environment. Now we start to become a little more stressed as the pressure starts to pile on. Now really there should only be one line here, but I had a few goes at drawing it, so just think of that internal line for now. You get a bit stressed, and for a little while your performance can go up, because when we are really challenged, sometimes we can just rise to that challenge, but this is really tiring. We can't sustain this for a long time, and if the pressure keeps piling on, if it's sustained at this high level, we quickly become exhausted, and then we see an absolute dive in our performance. We become unable to cope, we become completely stressed out. Some people talk about your comfort zone, your stretch zone, and your panic zone, and that's quite a good way of describing it in a way. And really we should aim to work most of the time in our comfort zone, dipping into our stretch zone, easing off a bit to give ourselves a bit of a rest, recharge the batteries, then becoming stretched again. We have to be stretched so the brain feels it's getting somewhere. The brain likes this sort of stuff, but it's tiring, so you have to come back. If there's a war on, and if there's really good reason to do so, sometimes we've got to push it out and get into stress, or even, I'm really struggling now, panic zone, because it's a necessity, but you cannot do that to steady state. And there's no excuse for managers, workplaces, employers expecting anybody to do that a steady state. It's an excuse for underfunding and bad management. So we should always aim to be between comfort and stretch. If you get into panic zone, really can't cope, that's when it's all going to go badly wrong. And of course this explains a lot of things that go on in workplaces. When a lot of change occurs, change is often a very stressful thing for people. New processes throw people because they don't know how to do them. You're always in stretch. And in the modern workplace, certainly in the modern military, for many people, they're in stretch constantly, dipping into panic or stress on a regular basis. That's unsustainable, it's not good. That's why people leave. Other people are understimulated, but there you go. So there's your human function curve. So that's the end of part 2 of the Understanding Stress brief, and part 3 is coming soon.